An apocalypse breaks out in the world, and vile, bloodthirsty zombies appear all over. Amid the chaos and carnage, our protagonist, Ye Jong-ming, feels entirely out of place in this mad, apocalyptic world. He had long harbored thoughts about the collapse of the apocalyptic world and met his end at the hands of his teammates. Let's dive into the world of 10 years ago. There was a massive change in the world. 90% of humanity had become bloodthirsty mutants. As mutants rapidly infect humans en masse, mysterious wheels descended from the sky. Humans soon discovered crystals in zombies' heads, which could be used to spin the wheels and extract various materials, including weapons, gene medicine, and even supernatural abilities. Desperate to survive, human forces fought relentlessly for these wheels, turning the world into a brutal survival game. Zhang chose to obey to stay alive, even if it meant abandoning his principles. After a decade of grueling training, he finally earned his place on the elite monster fighting team. He believed his hard work would lead to a brighter future, but instead, it ended in betrayal and death at the hands of his own teammate. Just when he thought it was over, he woke up next to Bai Shi, a girl who died long ago, in the very house he lived in before the apocalypse. Naked and disoriented, he realizes it's September 10th, 2220, the day before the apocalypse began. As memories of the monstrous apocalypse flood his mind, he grapples with the horror of reliving that nightmare. But then, a spark of determination ignites within him. He recalls the 10 years of survival skills and combat experience he acquired. This rebirth may be his chance to rewrite his fate. With his mind made up, he vows to use his knowledge to navigate the impending chaos and live his life with newfound purpose and strategy. The story of Ye Zhongming begins anew, fueled by vengeance and a fierce will to change his destiny. He quickly dressed, ignoring the girl on the bed who asked where he was going. He yanked open the drawer and stared at the inheritance his parents had left him. In his previous life, he never used their luxury card, but with the apocalypse looming, he knew money would soon be worthless, so he had to use it now. Feeling snubbed, the girl raised her voice, demanding answers. He didn't hold back. He bluntly told her he knew about her affair with Qin Jun. Her face flushed with embarrassment and guilt. She fell silent, unable to meet his eyes. In his last life, when the apocalypse erupted, he used every method to protect her, but was betrayed in return. She chose to rely on Qin Jun, leaving him behind. She now claimed he had no right to ridicule her and Qin Jun, accusing him of being jealous of Jun's looks and strength and calling him a clown. Despite their past, he gave Shai one last warning. Qin Jun wasn't someone she could trust. He knew telling her that Jun would sell her for merely 3 cans of food wouldn't change her mind, so he didn't bother. Deciding not to waste more time on her, he focused on preparing medicine, food, and equipment. Meanwhile, she kept shouting that she was the one who abandoned him, insisting he wasn't leaving her and that she had chosen to leave him first. The scene shifts to a taxi, where he thrusts a pile of cash at the driver and demands a speedy trip to the nearest hospital. He swiftly gathers a stack of medicines at the hospital and stuffs them into a bag, knowing these supplies will be rare and incredibly valuable in the coming apocalypse. As he leaves the hospital, a woman accuses him of being an intruder and stealing. He says that the money for the medicines is on the counter, adding he has no time for further clarification, because people would only believe him once they meet the upcoming danger. He then hurries to an outdoor gear shop, methodically purchasing various defensive tools and gearing up from head to toe. Just as he's about to finalize his payment, he notices a machete on the weapons counter that resembles one he used in his past life. Without hesitation, he decides to buy it for 10 times the price, confident it will be invaluable. He left the shop confidently, unaware that the shopkeeper was secretly pleased, having duped him into paying 10 times the item's actual value. But the fool was oblivious to the looming danger ahead. After gathering everything he needed, he hopped into a taxi. The driver, enticed by the money, sped off, with the car racing towards Heyday Mansion, just a short distance away. He recalled from memory that the Apocalypse Wheel, also known as the Trade Wheel, the sole source of resources for survivors, should be located there. He needed to act quickly to secure the most vital equipment and special abilities it offered. He promised the taxi driver an extra $300 if he could get him to Heyday Mansion in 5 minutes. The driver quickly shifted gears, telling him to hold on tight. Racing down the road, the driver narrowly avoided hitting a pedestrian. As the driver sped ahead, his mind raced, remembering if he'd overlooked anything. Suddenly, it hit him. The Apocalypse Wheel, also known as the Trade Wheel. This was the sole source of survival resources. Water, food, equipment, and even special abilities. All could only be obtained by spinning that wheel. He needed to be the first to reach it. According to his memory, the first Apocalypse Wheel should be near the Heyday Mansion, but the taxi was stopped at the entrance to the high-end area. Undeterred, he instructed the driver to force their way through, promising to cover any damages. The driver complied and charged ahead while the alarmed policeman called for reinforcements. The car soon arrived at a desolate area and stopped slowly. Before getting out, he suggested the taxi driver stop and leave the area. He added that the driver should head to places with fewer people afterward. As he stepped out, guards chasing them quickly apprehended him. Noticing his calm demeanor, one guard mentioned that a taxi had smashed through their guardrails and accused him of trying to flee. The policeman warned him not to act dumb. Despite the situation, he remained composed and was told to look above in the sky. But a massive rumbling sound grew louder before the policeman could ask where, and he had no chance to reply. Slowly, an era-transcending battleship appeared, causing the policeman's expressions to shift from anger to sheer fear. Zhang felt a cold sweat as the scene mirrored precisely what happened 10 years ago. He wondered why the creator had left the wheel behind and forced people into conflict. Determined to change his fate, he seized this opportunity to become stronger and strike back. As the space battleship slowly approached, people who had no clue what was coming kept taking pictures to share online. But he knew better. He could tell it was only a matter of moments before the attack began. Seizing the chance, he turned and ran, using his martial arts to move swiftly. As he ran, he recalled that the attack would last 5 minutes. In that time, the world would descend into a living hell. In no time, he reached the door of a nearby villa. He rang the doorbell, posing as a delivery man. He remembered that the first wave of apocalyptic wheels would soon appear. Once the battleships ceased their assault, the wheels would descend. When the electric gate buzzed open, he slipped inside without hesitation. The woman inside, undeniably charming in her appearance, eyed him with suspicion. She insisted he wasn't a delivery man and demanded to know who he was. She warned him to leave or she would call the police. But he stood still, ignoring her words, knowing she had no combat skills and was completely unaware of the looming danger. Just as the woman was about to protest further, a loud explosion erupted outside, followed by terrified screams. His stomach tightened as he saw the massive space battleship releasing a fleet of giant vessels that crashed into cars and buildings. Curious onlookers moved closer, unaware of the threat, only to see the vessels split open, releasing a green mist that shot toward them. Within seconds, those caught in the fog transformed into terrifying undead. One man tried to save a friend, but it was too late. The friend had already turned into a deadly zombie who attacked him without mercy. For him, who had lived through the apocalypse, the chaos outside was nothing new. The lady, however, was visibly shaken by the screams and destruction. Her eyes wide with fear, she demanded that he leave her house immediately, clearly unsure of his intentions. But he, unfazed by her panic, ignored her and noticed a strange glimmer coming from the kitchen. Without hesitation, he rushed towards it and found himself staring at a massive golden wheel that had mysteriously appeared before him. Curious and anxious, the lady followed him into the kitchen, only to be stunned by the sight of the enormous wheel. At the center of the wheel was a gray crystal, indicating it was the one-rank, one-crystal wheel. Despite that, he felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him. He knew even a one-crystal wheel could offer something valuable. But the woman beside him was filled with doubt. How could something like this just appear out of nowhere? He wasn't concerned with her skepticism. He focused on the rewards within the wheel. He spotted a strengthening drug that could boost a person's strength 2- or 3-fold. But there was a problem. He had no crystals to activate the wheel. As he examined the wheel closer, he noticed something unusual. Typically, level 1 wheels only required 5 crystals, but this one needed 7. This difference made him confident there was something even more valuable hidden within. After another look, he spotted the prize, a lucky card. The lady, puzzled by his muttering, finally asked what he was talking about. He explained that a lucky card could enhance a person's unique abilities, such as improving their physical strength or granting them a companion beast. In the back of his mind, he wondered why this woman hadn't turned into a zombie yet. It could mean she had some resistance to the poison. He began to think she might be helpful, perhaps even a reliable assistant in the future. But the woman wasn't convinced by his explanation. She still eyed him suspiciously. He pointed out to the lady that the screaming outside had suddenly stopped. Her eyes widened with surprise as she realized something terrible must have happened. Ignoring the danger, she decided to step outside and see for herself. He knew this was a fatal mistake. The silence meant that most of the screaming humans had already turned into mutants, no longer able to cry out. As she cracked open the door, an undead creature lunged at her. She stumbled back, crashing to the ground, struggling desperately to fend off the snarling monster. But it quickly overpowered her, pinning her down. Just as it seemed she was done, a flash of light sliced through the air, and the undead's head rolled away. Dazed, the lady looked up to see him standing over her, his machete gleaming with fresh blood. He had saved her in the nick of time. He bent down and pulled a crystal from the monster's head. The lady stared at it, suddenly realizing it looked exactly like the one on the mysterious wheel in her kitchen. 2 more undead creatures charged toward the open door before she could fully process what had just happened. She screamed a warning, telling him to look behind him. In an instant, he spun around, facing the 2 undead head-on. With a quick, fluid motion, he leaned out of their reach and slashed once, taking both creatures down in a single deadly strike. The lady watched in shock, her heart racing as she realized just how lethal he indeed was. He had seemed like just an ordinary guy to her, but now she saw the brutal efficiency with which he handled the mutants, and it left her speechless. In her shock, the lady asked for his name. After introducing himself, he extended a hand, pulled her to her feet, and then asked for her name in return. When she answered, his eyes widened in disbelief. She was Mu Xinfei, the rumored 9-star expert from his past life, the legendary figure who could single-handedly face entire divine armies. Yet here she was, just a delicate girl, far from the mighty existence he had known. Still shaken by his reaction, Xinfei pressed him for answers, demanding to know what was happening outside. He didn't hesitate, and bluntly informed her that Earth had been invaded. As she could see, most people had already turned into zombies. He explained that while he didn't yet know who was behind the invasion, a few people around the world, like the 2, hadn't been infected. He also mentioned that he had been collecting crystals from the heads of the undead, showing her the tiny, shimmering objects that were the key to survival in this new world. After listening to his detailed explanation, she grasped the dire situation outside and suggested they seek help from the government or military. But he shook his head, explaining that those entities likely collapsed within minutes of the attack. As far as he could tell, the entire Earth had become a playground for the undead. His mind raced with calculations. If Xin had become an N-star expert in his past life, she must have possessed some extraordinary traits that were still hidden. He needed an assistant, and she seemed like the perfect candidate. So, he decided to teach her the survival rules of this new undead world. First, he explained, were the wheels that humanity relied on to survive the apocalypse. Most supplies came from them, but activating a wheel required crystals extracted from the heads of the undead. The more valuable the wheel's rewards, the more crystals it needed. She, being sharp, quickly caught on that there must be more wheels out there. But her curiosity improved, and she asked how he knew all this. He didn't want to reveal that he had been reborn, so he swiftly changed the subject, suggesting she try spinning the wheel while he hunted zombies outside. Turning to leave, he paused at the door and gave her a stern warning to shut the door tightly behind him and, under no circumstances, to go outside. With that, he stepped out, preparing to face the undead once more, leaving her to process everything she had just learned. On the street, the undead wandered aimlessly, their groans filling the air. One of them seemed to sense something, turning its head just as he drove a blade into its skull. Sensing fresh prey, several other undead charged at him, but he was no easy target. His movements were quick and precise, his body agile as he weaved through the mass of rotting bodies. With practiced ease, he delivered powerful thrusts, slicing through the zombies like they were nothing more than overripe vegetables. As the last of them fell, he meticulously collected the crystals from their foreheads. But just as he finished, he heard desperate cries for help from behind him. Spinning around, he saw a girl being chased by 2 undead. Panic etched on her face. She bolted toward him, hiding behind his back in fear. Without hesitating, he stepped forward, meeting the undead head-on. With a swift motion, he brandished his blade, slashing them into mangled flesh with a series of rapid, deadly strikes. But as he turned to check on the girl, her demeanor shifted. She clawed at him frantically, her mouth stretching open in a grotesque scream as she lunged at him. Thankfully, he was ready. In one fluid motion, he reached out, his hand hooking her head and driving his blade straight into her forehead, ending the threat before it could even begin. Xin was amazed when he returned with 11 undead crystals, adding them to the 3 he had already collected. It was just enough for 2 spins on the mysterious metal wheel. With Xin watching curiously, he carefully placed the crystals into the slots individually. As the last crystal disappeared, the wheel began spinning wildly, both watching in anticipation. He silently prayed for some functional medicine as the wheel blurred with speed. When it finally slowed to a stop, the wheel spat out 4 cans of food. He stared at them, feeling a wave of disappointment wash over him. During the apocalypse, canned food was a rare luxury, but it wasn't what he needed now. He wanted something to give them a fighting chance, not just more supplies. To make matters worse, Jin had already organized a large stash of unspoiled food while he was out hunting zombies, enough to last them for a while. Eating canned food at this point felt like a waste of a precious spin. Frustrated by his continued bad luck, he turned to her with an idea, suggesting she give it a try, thinking her luck might be better than his. He handed her the remaining crystals, hoping that the wheel might offer something more valuable this time. Once again, the wheel is about to be activated. The way she placed the crystals, is it just me? Or does she look like she's about to unlock a secret level with that pose? The wheel whirred to life, and both waited with bated breath. He thought each spin at the start of the apocalypse was crucial, as it could rapidly boost combat abilities. But a moment later, he was stunned. This time, the wheel landed on an extremely valuable elimination card. He explained that the card allowed her to eliminate one reward. While it might not seem necessary now, he believed its value would become apparent when spinning for crucial equipment and skills. He looked at her in astonishment and asked if her luck was always this incredible. She shared that she had always been fortunate, whether it was getting extra bottles from soft drinks, winning big prizes from cracking eggs, or even drawing a live cow in a supermarket's lucky draw. This made him, who had been struggling with persistent lousy luck, feel almost depressed. He speculated that Shin's luck might be due to her fortunate physique. Watching her bask in her excitement, he couldn't help but sneer. If she had a winning physique, he was determined to take full advantage of it. Early the following day, he prepared to slay the undead as daylight broke. His goal for the day was to collect 100 crystals. Seeing his confident determination, she decided she couldn't afford to slack off. She resolved to support this great benefactor and make a meal worthy of 100 crystals. After some time, he returned, panting and out of breath. He had 2 pieces of news for her, and asked which she wanted to hear first. She opted for the excellent news. The good news was that the area was now completely overrun by zombies, but he had managed to clear them all out. This impressive update thrilled her, and she eagerly asked for the bad news. The bad news was that he had only collected 21 crystals despite searching the entire area, checking every house, room, and hidden spot. Seeing his slight discouragement, she reassured him that these crystals were still enough for several spins on the wheel. He asked her if there was something to eat, as he was hungry. Soon the dishes were served, but their appearance was likely unappetizing even to dogs. She hesitantly admitted that she wasn't very skilled in cooking, and with a hint of sadness, suggested that if he found the food unpalatable, he could always eat from the cans in the fridge. Despite the less than appealing presentation, he took a large bite and told her it tasted good, even if it looked terrible. Her eyes lit up at his comment, as he was the first person not to reject her cooking. It's because he had survived the apocalypse and had faced far worse, including eating dead human meat, so hunger and thirst were his greatest fears. After finishing his meal, they went to the wheel to use the crystals he had collected. She proved her luck as the wheel rewarded them twice in a row with practical weapons, a gun and a crossbow. She then handed him the remaining crystals, urging him to try it. He shook his head, saying his luck was too poor. Undeterred, she took his hand, blew on it, and with a sincere expression, told him she had transferred her luck to him. Her gesture made him blush, unable to hide his surprise and gratitude. 6 rewards remained on the wheel, with the odds of hitting the enhanced gene medicine now sitting at a slim 1 in 6. She quickly suggested using the elimination card to remove the cookie option, hoping to improve their chances. But before they could reconsider, the discard card touched the wheel and suddenly ignited. His eyes widened in disbelief. Once the card made contact, their decision was set in stone. Now, with a 1 in 5 shot, he knew there was no turning back. Without a moment's delay, he inserted the crystals to initiate the spin. As the wheel started to whirl, both launched into fervent prayers. Whether invoking the Eastern Amitabha or the Western Amun, they called upon every divine power imaginable. As the wheel gradually slowed and the arrow settled on a green potion bottle, their faces lit up as if they had just won the jackpot. Indeed, they had struck gold with the novice body-strengthening potion. This wasn't just any reward. It was a game-changer capable of amplifying the user's combat skills and physical strength by at least 3-fold during the early stages of the apocalypse. In a harsh world where survival was a luxury, a body-strengthening drug like this was nothing short of essential. Excitedly, she urged him to drink the potion immediately. However, he had a different plan in mind. Instead of gulping it down, he carefully combined the strengthening potion with some heparin he had taken from the hospital, pouring both into a tray. He explained to her that mixing the 2 substances could double the potion's volume, effectively transforming 1 bottle into 2. He further elaborated that the wheel they used wasn't unique. Numerous others were scattered in various locations, each equipped with its own set of reward boards. With the additional bottles they'd created, they could trade for valuable skill cards or specialized medicines with other survivors. This strategy enhanced their immediate strength and opened up opportunities for bartering and negotiations, increasing their chances of long-term survival in the apocalypse. Soon enough, the two newly created strengthening potions were sitting before them. She was about to ask him how he knew how to make the medicine. Still, before she could complete, he quickly shifted the conversation, pointing out that the medical water's temperature was too high and needed to be lowered immediately. Then, turning back to her, he emphasized that she should memorize every detail of the process and the correct temperature standards, because it would be her turn to make the potion next time. She nodded, already feeling confident she could handle the task. After finishing the potion making, she couldn't resist asking the same question again about how he knew all this. But before he could answer, they were interrupted by a knocking sound from outside. His expression turned serious as he hushed her, quickly pulling her upstairs. Confused, she asked why he seemed so alarmed. He explained that the sound came from a mutated stink bug. The infectious virus, these locusts had evolved into cannibalistic insects. While they weren't solid individually, they hunted in swarms, and spotting one meant the entire horde was nearby. Sure enough, with just a little effort, the swarm of mutated locusts broke through the door, swarming up the stairs towards them. The two scrambled to use a wardrobe to block the door, but he warned her that these bugs were more dangerous than they seemed. They could even infect plants, turning them into flesh-eating organisms. When they thought they were safe, the banging sounds started again, louder this time. She, startled, instinctively jumped into his arms. He might have thought, "Forget the bug spray. We need some modesty spray here, stat." However, he eased her fears by telling her not to be scared, assuring her that he's there for her, and his words made her feel at ease. Seeing the door battered relentlessly, he realized it wouldn't hold out much longer. He quickly decided to have her hide in the bathroom while he prepared to face the oncoming swarm. When she anxiously asked how he planned to survive against so many, he reassured her it would only take a few minutes. Without hesitation, he pulled out the strengthening potion he had just prepared. Aware of the side effects but knowing it was his best shot, he drank it down without a second thought. As soon as he downed the potion, a wave of excruciating pain surged through his body, sending him collapsing to the ground. He wriggled in agony, feeling like his entire body was on fire. But as the pain threatened to overwhelm him, the mutated beetles finally broke through the door. He crumpled to the floor, but the potion's effects started kicking in. Was this the end for him? Not a chance. In an instant, a flash of steel pierced through the air, impaling one of the beetles. Boosted by the potion's strength, he sprang into action, launching himself at the swarm with lethal precision. His eyes glowed with an eerie red light, making him look like a reaper from the depths of hell. The pain from the drug's side effects was unbearable, driving him to scream in fury as he fought. The mutated beetles swarmed him, but he roared defiantly and charged forward, his blade slicing through them with relentless force. In a frenzy of slashing and stabbing, he tore through the horde, leaving a trail of carnage in his wake. Green mutated blood splattered across the walls and floor as he hacked away at the last of the creatures. Finally, when the previous beetle fell, he was left standing amid the destruction, panting heavily from the exhausting battle, his body trembling from both the fight and the after-effects of the potion. As he surveyed the shattered limbs scattered across the floor, a nagging suspicion crept into his mind. A locust swarm's appearance always signaled a locust queen's presence. The swarm would keep reproducing endlessly if the queen wasn't dealt with. As he pondered this, a massive mutant loomed into view. It was the locust queen. Enraged at the sight of her slaughtered brood, the queen spewed a jet of green liquid at him. Fortunately, he reacted quickly, dodging the acidic spray by a hair's breadth. The liquid sizzled and corroded everything touched, but he wasn't intimidated. As the queen charged at him again, he decided to stop holding back. He leaped into the air in a flash, soaring above the queen before driving his blade down hard into her back. The locust queen let out a bone-chilling shriek of agony, writhing in pain. But he was relentless. He lived by the motto, "Strike when your enemy is weakest." Without hesitation, he twisted the blade handle, then plunged it in deeper. In moments, the queen's strength drained away, and she collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud, defeated. After the battle, he finally staggered over to the bathroom, knowing that the more he pushed himself, the worse the potion's side effects would become. But as soon as he opened the door, Shin leapt into his arms, clinging to him tightly. Despite his exhaustion, he felt a sense of comfort wash over him, and gently told her not to cry, reminding her that tears were the most useless thing in the apocalypse. Slowly, she managed to calm herself, though the shock of being saved from such a nightmare still lingered. But when she turned her head and saw the bloody mess outside, her stomach churned. As she tried to figure out how on earth they were going to dispose of the pile of corpses, he made a surprising comment. He casually mentioned that these were all fresh, delicious sashimi, hinting that this would be their food source as time passed. When she looked at him in disbelief, he explained that food supplies would become scarce after a year, and these mutants would be one of the few edible resources left. He explained that in the apocalypse, food would come from 3 primary sources: unexpired food, food obtained from the wheel, and the corpses of the swarm. The idea of eating mutants made her eyes widen in horror, but he, ever pragmatic, pointed out that eating these creatures was still far better than resorting to cannibalism, a thought that left her even more shaken. Helplessly, she equipped herself with what she could find and began the grim task of hacking off the broken limbs. In no time, she had chunks of meat, both large and small, piled into a basin. He, noticing her quick adaptation, praised her for getting used to such. He whirled around and saw a vicious undead charging straight at him, aiming for his groin. Fear gripped him and he broke into a cold sweat. In a panic, he slammed his fist into the undead's face, shielding himself and cursing the creature. When the undead charged at him, aiming for his groin, he thought, "Great, even zombies know where it hurts the most." Now fueled by anger, he decided to deal with the 10 undead once and for all. The hallway was narrow, perfect for a defensive stance and a counterattack. Just as he was about to strike, a gray hand reached out from the shadows. Staying calm, he swung his blade with precision. The hand flew off, green liquid splattering across the floor in a gruesome spray. In a flashback, we see her life just a few days ago. She had everything: pursuers, fame, material wealth, and knowledge, truly the darling of heaven. But in a matter of days, everything had unraveled. Her relatives, friends, and even her father had turned into man-eating mutants. She was left kneeling helplessly. As she faced what seemed like her final moments, she saw the undead lying defeated on the ground. Overwhelmed with joy, she couldn't believe he had managed to eliminate all the threats before her eyes. Her relief was interrupted by Zhang's scolding. If she wanted to stay alive, she couldn't afford to dawdle. They had to find the key, and they needed to act quickly. The downstairs area was swarming with undead, making it clear that going down was not an option. Their only chance was to reach the rooftop and find another way out. He had a plan. The rooftop of their building connected to the building in front, and he planned to exit the building from there. If they could make it there, they'd be closer to their goal. He figured that once he descended from that building, the key would be just 2 streets away. As he surveyed the area, he noticed vines creeping over every surface, their relentless growth overtaking the landscape. Suddenly, a branch snapped toward the young girl, wrapping its tendrils around her and lifting her off the ground with surprising force. Without missing a beat, he sprang into action, intercepting the movement and catching her in mid-air. His response was swift and calculated, driven by instinct rather than emotion. He set her down without a word, his focus immediately shifting back to the task at hand. She glanced at him, impressed by his quick thinking, but he remained unfazed, his mind occupied with the challenges ahead. Irritation simmered as he faced the mutated plants that slowed their progress. Every second spent dealing with the overgrown foliage felt like a waste of time. He hacked through the vines with growing impatience, determined to push forward. At last, they reached a locked door. She asked what they should do next. His answer was direct and decisive, a powerful kick that sent the door crashing open. They quickly made their way to the rooftop, where they were met with the unexpected sight of a large group of survivors already gathered, waiting for whatever came next. A blond guy wielding a baseball bat approached them with a stern expression, demanding to know what they were doing. He warned that breaking the door could attract more of the undead. Zhang quickly stepped forward, clarifying that they meant no harm and had already cleared out all the zombies in their building. The blonde's eyes widened in surprise, clearly taken aback by the claim. It seemed unbelievable that anyone could have cleared out all the zombies in such a place, especially with the constant threat of more potentially making their way up to the roof. Despite his skepticism, they used a shovel to prop up the broken door, hoping it would at least delay any potential threats. The blonde turned back to him, accusing him of putting everyone in danger regardless. Before tensions could escalate, his friends intervened, pointing out that he and the girl hadn't even known there were others in the building. The blonde's anger subsided slightly, but his distrust remained evident in his gaze. As the situation calmed, he took a moment to scan the surroundings from the rooftop, his eyes searching the horizon. The blonde, still wary, asked him about his intentions. He revealed that his goal was to reach the middle school. The blonde raised an eyebrow in surprise, questioning how he planned to navigate the streets, likely crawling with zombies. He explained that he had seen some lights in that area and was determined to investigate them. The blonde's expression shifted from skepticism to reluctant admiration. Impressed by his courage, he confirmed that the lights were indeed at the school. He then pointed out a possible shortcut, another building close to the east side of the rooftop. If he was willing to take the risk, he could try jumping across to reach it. However, the blonde warned that it was a dangerous move, one that could seriously injure anyone who attempted it. He looked at the gap between the buildings, weighing his options. The jump was risky, but it was also the fastest route to his destination. Determined, he made up his mind. The blonde watched him closely, as if trying to gauge whether this stranger would actually go through with it. He immediately headed east, intent on assessing the situation for himself. The gap between the buildings was about 5 meters, with the opposite rooftop sitting 1 level lower, a distance he judged to be challenging but manageable. For him, it was nothing more than a test of his daily training, something he felt confident in handling. He made up his mind to take the leap. Just as he was about to move, the girl tugged at his clothes, her eyes wide with fear as she pleaded with him not to leave her behind. A brief pang of compassion crossed his mind, and he agreed to take her backpack with him across the gap. The blonde, watching this unfold, scoffed and warned that he was asking for trouble by trying to take both. Zhang, thinking quickly, suggested using ropes to secure the backpack and his body to hers, ensuring they could cross together safely. The blonde let out a harsh laugh, dismissing the idea. He pointed out that there was no way she could make the jump while burdened with both a heavy backpack and another person. Instead, he offered a different solution. The girl should pass the backpack to him, and he would throw it over once they were safely on the other side. But Zhang wasn't convinced. He knew that handing over the backpack could mean losing it forever, especially to someone as untrustworthy as the blonde. When he declined the offer, the blonde's demeanor shifted from dismissive to hostile. His eyes narrowed, and he threatened to break his arm if he didn't comply. Zhang could have replied with a cold smile, "You'll have to catch me first. Good luck with that." Without another word, he backed up, took a running start, and leaped from the 200-meter-high building. Time seemed to slow as he sailed through the air, the wind rushing past him. He landed on the opposite roof with a heavy thud, his bare arm and knee absorbing the impact, leaving scratches and bruises in their wake. The blonde stood on the other side, stunned into silence, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. Wasting no time, he quickly secured the ropes and prepared to help the girl across. But as he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His instincts proved correct. A hulking stranger, hidden in the shadows and observing them through binoculars, had been tracking their every move. This stranger, a member of a notorious outlaw community, saw the chaos unfolding below as an opportunity. These outlaws thrived on preying upon the vulnerable, exploiting lost and helpless women for their own twisted purposes. The predatory gleam in his eyes made it clear that he had set his sights on them, and he wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. Inside the grimy, makeshift establishment, women were being forcibly abused, and in private rooms, people placed bets on the brutality of the assailants. One guy turned to his friend and asked how much longer he thought the abuser would last. The friend, placing a bet for a cigarette, guessed 1 more minute. The white-haired guy scoffed, saying that this rundown place didn't even have a box of wine. He'd only found the cigarette from the body of an old man. His friend countered that if the place wasn't a school canteen, where would he find wine? To get wine, he'd need to head to the principal's office. A bald guy chimed in, noting that the principal's office was locked by some fool of a student. So what could they do? One of the men suggested they wait for the 5th brother, Lao Wu, and proposed throwing all the girls to the zombies. The white-haired guy objected, arguing that they shouldn't throw them away. This angered the bald guy, who seemed to think they'd gone beyond the point of no return. As they conversed, the giant who had been closely watching the girl with Zhang walked in. The room erupted in chants of 5th brother in his honor. One of the men informed him that the building they were occupying was now surrounded by a massive horde of zombies, effectively trapping them inside. One guy grumbled about how one night had dramatically shifted the world's balance. Lao Wu laughed, dismissing the concern. He told them to do whatever they pleased, asserting that in this world, only the strongest reign supreme. Even the apocalypse, he claimed, only made their rule more divine. The scene shifts to Zhang risking his life as he weaves through the perilous streets in search of the dungeon key. His movements are swift and calculated, effortlessly darting past lurking monsters. However, the girl struggles to keep up, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Fear and exhaustion weigh heavily on her, and she finally begs him to slow down, terrified that he might leave her behind. Irritated, he begrudgingly slows his pace, but not without grumbling under his breath. He mutters about how she's become a burden, feeling tricked into helping her simply because she appeared helpless. His frustration is palpable, yet despite his annoyance, she manages to keep up, pushing herself to match his pace. After what feels like an eternity, they finally reach the school. The silence that greets them is eerie, with not a single sound to indicate the presence of the undead. The air is thick with tension, and he can't help but wonder where the zombies have gone. He guesses that the quiet is due to the undead being gathered elsewhere by sheer chance. He's right. Inside the school, multiple students have barricaded themselves in classrooms, desperately trying to escape the undead that had overrun the area. Their faces are marked by despair, knowing that even if the zombies don't breach their makeshift defenses, hunger and isolation will eventually take their toll. As they cautiously move through the hallways, a girl trapped inside one of the classrooms spots them. Her eyes widen with a mix of hope and desperation, and she begins calling out for help, her voice trembling with fear. The girl at his side instinctively moves to respond, but he immediately stops her, his hand shooting out to silence her. "Don't," he admonishes, his voice low and stern. He reminds her that making noise could attract the undead lurking nearby, potentially leading them straight to their location. He points out, with a bluntness that stings, that she wouldn't be able to defend herself if they were swarmed. His words are harsh, but they're rooted in the grim reality of their situation. She hesitates, a pang of sadness washing over her as she looks at the trapped students. The sight of their helplessness and fear tugs at her heart, filling her with distress. She wants to help them, to do something, anything, to ease their suffering. But he, ever the realist, quickly quashes her thoughts of heroism. He explains that they have no idea how many zombies are outside those classrooms, and that he's not equipped to take on such a large number. His tone is firm as he tells her that this is the apocalypse, and if she truly wants to save those students, she'll have to find a way to do it on her own. The gravity of his words sinks in, and she nods, a quiet apology slipping from her lips. As she followed him through the dark, dilapidated corridors of the school, a flurry of questions raced through her mind. Why had he chosen this school as his destination? Was there any hidden sanctuary where they could evade the relentless zombies? The eerie silence of the school, punctuated only by their footsteps, heightened her anxiety. Trying to break the tension, she gathered the courage to thank him for saving her earlier and asked for his name. He stopped abruptly and turned to face her with a skeptical look. He asked her if she really thought a single word from her could repay the risk he had taken, his tone dripping with sarcasm. She was momentarily stunned, unsure of how to respond. His bluntness caught her off guard. In frustration, she asked what he actually wanted. With a smirk, he told her that he had saved her to use her as bait. He added, almost casually, that in a tight spot, a pack of instant noodles would be more useful than she was. His remark left her speechless and taken aback by his cold indifference. Swallowing her pride, she introduced herself as Liang Chu Yin. In return, he shared his name. Despite his harsh demeanor, she decided to stick with him, convincing herself that deep down, he was a decent person, even if his mood was perpetually sour. As they continued their search for the dungeon key, the distant cries for help from a corner classroom reached their ears. He hypothesized that the survivors inside might have seen the key or at least had valuable information about its location. He instructed Liang to stay hidden and, with agility, climbed up a pillar to reach the classroom. The noise from his movement attracted the undead inside the school. As a monstrous creature lunged at him, he reacted swiftly. He delivered a powerful kick to one's head, sending it crashing into a nearby wall. Landing with precision, he drew his blade and, in a series of swift, calculated strikes, dispatched the approaching undead. Inside the classroom, 3 survivors huddled together, their fear palpable. Among them was Teacher Pooh, who stepped forward with a mixture of relief and gratitude. He scanned the room, assessing the survivors, and wondering if they had seen where the key might have fallen. Teacher Pooh introduced himself and explained that they were trapped with 2 students and a girl named Chiang who had sadly perished. Pooh asked if they had seen a ray of light, emphasizing that any detail could be crucial. He promised that if they helped him locate the key, he would ensure their safety. The 2 students shook their heads, indicating they hadn't witnessed the light. However, Pooh spoke up with certainty, saying she had indeed seen it, and even knew where it had landed. His curiosity piqued, he immediately pressed for the exact location of the light. Pooh, however, insisted that he first rescue them before revealing the key's location. Doubts clouded his judgment, and he hesitated, questioning whether he would really assist them once he knew where the key was. Pooh described the key's descent in vivid detail, hoping it would be enough to secure their rescue. Despite the detailed description, he assessed that the situation was dire. There were too many undead outside to guarantee the safety of all 3 survivors. With his current capabilities, he could only take 2 people with him. The children, outraged by his decision, demanded an explanation for his apparent disregard for their companion's life. They argued vehemently, finding his choice unfair and unreasonable. He sneered at their frustration, dismissing their pleas with a grim reminder. There's no fairness in the apocalypse. Only the strong survive while the weak are left to perish. With a hardened resolve, he instructed them to remain where they were if they chose to wait for death. Drawing his sword and bracing for any potential attacks, he made his decision. He would take the 2 who were willing to follow him, leaving the rest to their uncertain fate. The students were gripped by fear, but Pooh gently caressed their shoulders, trying to offer them a shred of comfort. He, standing at a distance, ordered them to decide who among them would leave with him. Understanding that only 2 could be saved out of the 3, Pooh didn't hesitate. Without a second thought, she selflessly offered the students the chance. Observing this, he assured her that he would safely escort the 2 children out. However, when he pressed for the key's exact location, Pooh, to his surprise, insisted that he wait until after the students were secure. She promised to write down the location and toss it down to him only once they were safe. It was clear that Pooh had meticulously planned this, and her every move was calculated to ensure the children's survival. With a cold tone, he remarked that he hoped she wouldn't regret her self-sacrificing choice, and then ordered the students to follow him. He could feel the presence of 3 zombies lurking just behind the door. He quickly instructed Pooh to lock the door as soon as they exited. As he opened the door, one of the zombies tried to slip through, but he was faster, delivering a swift kick that sent the creature crashing into the wall. In one fluid motion, he decapitated it with a precise slice. Pooh, though outwardly stern, was just as terrified as the others. Yet, she stayed firm, fully aware of her duty to protect her students. Grabbing the 2 girls, he led them swiftly down the stairs, but something felt amiss. The entire corridor was eerily silent. Not a single undead could be seen. A looming, monstrous presence seemed to hang in the air, and he quickly warned them to slow down. The students, their anxiety mounting, asked if he had sensed something wrong, as the path ahead appeared clear. Ignoring whether his instincts might be off, he pressed on, racing down the stairs. Suddenly, a massive shadowy serpent lunged at them in a surprise attack. He, reacting in an instant, drew his machete and swung above, only for the serpent to vanish before his blade could connect. The girls, bewildered, asked why they had stopped again. More convinced now of a lurking danger, he hushed them, but after a thorough search, he found nothing, leaving him to question whether his senses were playing tricks on him. The shadow serpent crept closer and closer to the girls, inch by inch, while they remained oblivious to the looming danger. He, trailing behind, was lost in thought, the strange aura around him gnawing at his instincts. The serpent flicked its tongue, teasing Xiao's hair and sending a chill down her spine. When she turned to look, her blood ran cold. She was face to face with the serpent's gaping mouth, filled with sharp, jagged teeth ready to crush her. Panic-stricken, she nearly lost control of herself. In that split second, he hurled his machete at the serpent's mouth. With a sharp swoosh, a piece of the serpent's lip fell to the ground. The building echoed with its agonizing shriek, a sound that pierced through the gut and heart. Enraged, the serpent lashed out with its claw at him. But instead of retreating, he stood his ground, meeting the attack head-on with his fist. To his shock, the punch didn't even faze the beast. He quickly realized that the serpent had metal-clad arms, making it a nearly indestructible foe. Its relentless attacks, barely dodged by him, proved it was far harder to defeat than he had anticipated. Seeing the serpent's relentless strength, he launched a perfect roundhouse kick, aiming for its head with all his might. But the attack seemed to have no effect. Instead, the serpent's insane strength allowed it to seize him by the leg. With a brutal force, it slammed him into the ground so hard that the floor cracked beneath him. The girl watched in horror, her heart gripped with fear. If he couldn't defeat this monster, none of them had a chance to escape. Desperately, she called out to her companion, Lee, for help, but to her dismay she fled, abandoning her in panic. Now he appeared heavily injured and barely able to move. The serpent raised its powerful arms high, preparing to crush him with all its might. Was this how his tragic life would end? Just as the serpent was about to deliver the fatal blow, a sudden bang echoed through the hallway. The serpent was sent flying northwest by a gunshot. He had managed to draw a gun just in time. He felt a surge of relief, but his condition was far from stable. The earlier impact had dislocated his right arm. Gritting his teeth, he urged the girl to get up quickly if they wanted any chance of survival. But before they could move, the sound of metallic thuds echoed from the stairwell. Tong, 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 as footsteps gradually drew closer. The girl's heart leaped into her throat, her fear spiking. Only then did he fully realize the gravity of their situation. Could the gunshot have attracted nearby undead? Seeing the impending danger, he immediately shielded the two girls behind him. But within seconds, Liang, having come up from downstairs, hurled herself into his arms, breathless and terrified. She stammered that she had waited for him so long she was scared to death. Relieved to see she wasn't one of the undead, the two girls exhaled deeply. Through her fear, Liang explained that after a prolonged search, she had finally found him. Earlier, at the multimedia center, a sudden flash of light had erupted, causing a horde of undead to surge in from all directions. Trapped in the chaos, she had been overwhelmed with fear and, with no other option, had fled in desperation, racing upstairs to find him. As he absorbed her account, the pieces fell into place. The source of light that attracted the undead was clear now. It was the light from the wheel. As the old saying goes, sometimes you search fruitlessly, only to find what you need by chance. He quickly gathered everyone and led them downstairs. On the way down, Li expressed her regret to Xiao for not being able to help her, and she accepted it with understanding, acknowledging it wasn't intentional. They soon exited the classroom building without incident. Seeing that all the students were safe, Pooh hesitated for a moment, considering whether she should have kept the key's location secret, trusting that he would eventually come to rescue her. But she quickly dismissed the thought, realizing he still had the kids to worry about. She tossed down the paper with the location written on it. Liang asked him why he hadn't helped Pooh. He explained that the teacher had mistrusted him, so he decided to teach her a lesson. As he unfolded the paper and read it, he discovered that the key had landed at a construction site, an out-of-the-way spot that most people would overlook. Realizing the importance of finding the wheel that Liang mentioned, he concluded that the wheel was his top priority. Distrusting the students' reliability, he decided to look for the wheel first rather than search for the dungeon key with them. He informed everyone that they were heading to the multimedia center despite her warning that it was overrun with zombies. He brushed off the danger, confident that the greater the risk, the greater the reward. With determination, he instructed the students to follow him. When they arrived at the multimedia center, it quickly became apparent that it was teeming with undead. Lee, alarmed, questioned whether he had deliberately led them into such a dangerous situation. It seemed to her that, after getting the information he needed, he considered them expendable and intended to use them as bait for the undead. He, hearing their concerns, responded firmly. He explained that the apocalypse was filled with undead no matter where one went. He assured them that he wasn't so despicable as to use them as mere bait. He made it clear that they had to wait outside until he cleared out the center and returned. After giving his instructions, he ventured alone into the multimedia center. Liang wondered why he was so determined to go inside. Was there something crucial he needed? Lee, meanwhile, was concerned that he was making a grave mistake. Despite having a gun, she doubted his ability to take on all the zombies alone. While they took refuge in a hallway, Lee decided they should leave for a safer location. She grabbed Xiao's hand and urged her to come with her, insisting that they couldn't wait around and risk being killed by the zombies. She frightened Xiao by suggesting that Zhang might not survive the overwhelming number of undead and that they needed to avoid the same fate. Xiao, who was soft-hearted, hesitated, worried about leaving him after all he had done for them. Liang, sensing something off, asked what they were planning. Li fibbed, claiming she had a stomachache and that Xiao was just accompanying her to the washroom. Although she found this explanation suspicious, her primary concern was for Zhang's safety. As he stepped inside, he saw a group of pitch-black undead. The situation was grim, but he noted with relief that there were no mutated monsters among them, unlike before. He prepared for yet another intense battle, knowing there was no room for hesitation. His right arm hung uselessly at his side, dislocated from a previous encounter. Without wasting any time, he grabbed his arm and, biting down on his machete to keep from making noise, forcefully reset it with a sharp crack. The pain shot through him, but he didn't dwell on it. He had been through this process many times in his past life, and knew better than to let it slow him down. The noise, however, caught the attention of the nearby zombies, who began closing in. He didn't hesitate. He quickly drew his pistol and started firing, each shot precise and controlled. The zombies fell one by one, their bodies piling up on the floor as he methodically cleared the room. The sound of gunfire echoed through the building, alerting those outside to the danger within. Li, assessing the situation, immediately formulated a plan. She decided to take shelter in the teacher's dormitory and urged Xiao to come with her, knowing they needed to act fast. However, Xiao broke away from her grip and ran toward Liang, pleading with her to join them instead. Li, frustrated by her actions, muttered that bringing her along was a mistake, thinking more people would only mean less food to go around. Liang, however, refused to abandon him. She questioned how long they thought they could survive without him. He was a powerful ally, and leaving him behind would be a death sentence for them. She tried to change Liang's mind, pointing out the risks, but Liang countered with cold logic. If Zhang couldn't handle himself inside the center, they had no chance of surviving outside. She was left without a response, silenced by her reasoning. Inside the building, the battle continued. Zhang moved with precision, cutting down the undead with ruthless efficiency. The floor was littered with the corpses of the zombies he had defeated, a stark reminder of the relentless fight he had just endured. Then something caught his eye amidst the chaos. Standing before him was a color wheel, distinct and unexpected. He approached cautiously, realizing as he got closer that this wasn't just any ordinary wheel. It was an extra rare tricolor wheel, far more valuable than anything he had anticipated finding. He paused, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. He knew its value and what it could mean for his future efforts. The exhaustion from the battle faded into the background as he prepared to claim this rare find. Understanding the significance of what lay before him. In the apocalypse, wheels wield incredible power, with the potential to save lives. While ordinary wheels range from grade 1 to 9, there are also special multicolored wheels. The tricolor wheel, the 7-color wheel, and the 9-color wheel. Ordinary wheels offer equipment and food, but multicolored wheels provide extraordinary benefits. They grant formidable battle skills such as warrior, assassin, and ranger abilities, as well as incredible support skills like doctor, alchemy, and even chef. Attaining a professional skill from a wheel unlocks its greatest resources. For instance, an assassin with a wild battle sword could achieve movie-like precision and prowess. However, compared to a single-color wheel, multicolored wheels are incredibly rare. There's also a risk. If the wheel lands on a black area, it could explode like a bomb. As he focused on the wheel, he noticed a badge within the black area, indicating it was a professional section, and therefore, safe from explosion. Despite his string of rotten luck, he had unexpectedly found a tricolor wheel. Could it be that Shin's luck had somehow transferred to him? In the hallway, Xiao desperately tried to persuade Liang to flee from the center, but she steadfastly refused. Instead, she warned them about the danger of making noise and attracting more zombies. Li, however, was confident that the zombies wouldn't pose a threat since they were all drawn to Zhang inside the center. She forcefully dragged Xiao away, sarcastically suggesting they should wait for his corpse, their supposed savior. Liang, enraged by this remark, slapped Li across the face, demanding she remember who had saved her life. Li, stung by the humiliation, retaliated with a slap of her own, warning Liang not to think he would always be there to protect them. As the tension escalated, Xiao tried to lead her away from the area, unaware of the looming dangers of the apocalypse. Meanwhile, in the darkness, a pair of watchful eyes focused intently on Liang, who remained blissfully unaware of the impending danger. Fifth brother, enjoying their recent fight, gave orders to his men to capture her immediately. Despite their concerns about plunging into a horde of zombies, their leader was confident that all the zombies had been lured into the center, making it relatively safe elsewhere. On the other side, Li, fuming with anger, searched for a good hiding spot. Xiao, bewildered and questioning their decision to go off alone, tried to keep her voice low, knowing that Li had already been slapped for her concerns. As they descended the stairs, they arrived at a location where they could clearly detect someone's presence due to subtle movements. Meanwhile, Liang was consumed by anger at the ungrateful girls. As she wandered aimlessly, she heard their distant screams. At that moment, a dark shadow began to close in on her. Before she could react, a man seized her from behind, restraining her tightly. Liang cried out loudly in panic, but her pleas went unheard. Suddenly, a crude man appeared from around the corner, leering as he remarked on Liang's beauty. He ordered his men to take her to Lao Wu for their amusement. She warned them that Zhang would not take kindly to this, but they dismissed her, confident that he was likely dead and that no one would come to her rescue. Back inside the multimedia center, he wished for a cheat code to automatically gather all the crystals, because in an apocalypse, the only thing worse than zombies is manual labor. Unaware of the chaos outside, he wished for a cheat code like in a game that could automatically gather all the crystals for him. Li and Xiao sprinted through the desolate streets, a savage zombie closing in on them with terrifying speed. Their breath came in ragged gasps as they cried out for help, but Li quickly silenced Xiao, warning her that shouting would only draw more of the undead to their location. In her desperation, Li stumbled, her legs giving way beneath her. Xiao, noticing her friend's struggle, stopped in her tracks and extended a hand to help her up. The zombie was nearly upon them, its growls growing louder. But Li, driven by an overwhelming instinct to survive, made a split-second decision. With a forceful shove, she pushed Xiao directly into the path of the approaching zombie, using her as bait to buy herself time to escape. Xiao's eyes widened in shock and disbelief as she was thrown to the ground, left to the mercy of the undead. The zombie pounced on her with feral aggression, and within moments, her screams were silenced, replaced by the grisly sounds of her demise. Li, drenched in sweat and shaking from the near miss, forced herself to keep moving. She retraced her steps back to the spot where Zhang had instructed them to wait, only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Liang was being dragged away by a group of kidnappers, her struggles futile against their overwhelming strength. Fear gripped Li as she watched the scene unfold, knowing that if she stayed, she could easily share the same fate. Without a second thought, Li began to back away, hoping to escape unnoticed. But one of the kidnappers caught sight of her and immediately gave chase. Panic surged through her as she fled once more, her lungs burning with every breath. Meanwhile, Liang, refusing to give in without a fight, managed to sink her teeth into the hand of one of her captors. He cursed in pain, loosening his grip just enough for her to break free. She stumbled and fell, but before the kidnapper could recapture her, a sharp blade suddenly pierced his hand. The kidnapper howled in agony, releasing her as he clutched his wounded hand. She, seizing the opportunity, scrambled to her feet and rushed towards Zhang, who had just arrived in the nick of time. She threw herself into his arms, relief washing over her as she realized he had come to save her. The building echoed with the kidnapper's gut-wrenching scream as he pulled the blade from his hand, his face contorted in fury. He spat out a threat, vowing that his boss and the notorious fifth brother would never let this insult go unpunished. But before he could finish his sentence, Zhang delivered a crushing punch to his chest, followed by a brutal kick to his face that sent him crumpling to the ground. With the kidnappers incapacitated, he turned to Liang, his expression serious. He asked where the other girls were, and she explained that Li and Xiao had doubted he would make it out alive, so they had decided to head in a different direction. As they spoke, Li staggered into view, breathless and disheveled. She quickly fabricated a story, claiming that Xiao had fallen behind and was overtaken by zombies. Her voice trembled as she apologized, promising to be more cautious in the future. Liang asked him what he was going to plan to do with the kidnappers. He told Liang that she needn't worry. The zombies would take care of them. There was no point in wasting any more energy on scum like them. With the multimedia center now secured and the undead threat eliminated, Li finally understood the full extent of his strength. She realized that staying close to him was her best shot at survival in this unforgiving world. He, sensing her newfound resolve, instructed them both to remain at the media center while he went back to retrieve someone important. As he disappeared into the shadows once more, the gravity of their situation sank in. They were now bound to his fate, their survival intertwined with his as they navigated the perils of a world overrun by the dead and ruled by the ruthless. Teacher Pooh heard knocking on the door and, in her despair, grabbed a shard of broken glass, ready to end her life. In the chaos of the apocalypse, where the undead roamed freely, she feared the worst and believed that death was imminent. She resolved to end her life on her own terms, feeling that her mission to help her students had been fulfilled. Just as she was about to act, Zhang kicked the door open with a forceful bang, interrupting her desperate decision. His timely arrival prevented her from making a tragic mistake. Teacher Pooh threw herself into his arms, tears flowing as she sobbed that she genuinely believed she was going to die. She thanked him for not abandoning her. Feeling satisfied after dealing with the kidnappers, Zhang tried to maintain his composure, struggling to hide his blush. He explained that his actions had been a lesson in trust, and now he was taking her to safety. On the other hand, Liang and Li were busy collecting crystals, as he had instructed. Li complained about the task, finding it repulsive. When he returned with Pooh, she quickly approached her student, embracing her and anxiously asking about Xiao. Upon learning that Xiao had been killed by the undead, Pooh blamed herself, unaware that Li had actually pushed Xiao into the path of danger. Seeing Pooh's distress, Li feigned sympathy, claiming that Xiao's death could have been avoided if Zhang had agreed to save everyone at once. She implied that they were indirectly responsible for Xiao's demise. Hearing Li's accusations, Liang erupted, shouting that if she hadn't ignored the advice and insisted on bringing Xiao along, the girl might not have been killed by the undead. Li, however, retorted that both Liang and Zhang had used people as bait for the undead, playing the role of saviors while putting others at risk. Before Li could say more, he slapped her face and told her to think before speaking in the future. He clarified that if he could save her, he could just as quickly leave her to the undead. He hoped the slap would make her realize that, in this apocalypse, taking on more people meant more danger, and he was under no obligation to save her. Saving her was an act of benevolence. Not saving her was his right. Seeing the tension escalate, Pooh quickly intervened, trying to calm things down. She explained that children often speak without thinking and urged everyone not to take it personally. She also expressed her gratitude to him for saving her life. Liang asked him why they had been tasked with collecting all the crystals. Without answering immediately, he led the group to where the tricolor wheel had appeared. Liang was surprised to discover this was where the crystals were meant to be used. He then explained that, unlike the rank wheel, the tricolor wheel didn't simply count the number of crystals. Instead, it measured their energy to meet a specific activation threshold. He inserted 20